Arisa, to you.
Thank you, Justin. Hi, everyone. So just a quick checklist to make sure that this session goes as smooth as we expect. Do you hear me well? You can tell me in the chat if you hear me well, or you can put some thumbs up. Okay, great. So I see some yes. Also, I guess you're seeing my screen with my checklist. Yeah, great. So this is the idea is that it's like an active session. Actually, we have some activities. There will be a brief introduction and then some activities. During the description of some ideas and instructions, obviously, just for the sake of the recording and also to make sure that everyone listens, I will ask you to mute your microphones, but there will be moments in which the idea is to exchange ideas actively. So it's sort of a workshop and there will be interactions and activities. So please jump in when it is expected to. So having said that, I am going to introduce myself briefly. My name is Isabel Hilliger. I'm an assistant professor of practice, and I'm also the associate director for assessment and evaluation at the School of Engineering in Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. And because of this, both my teaching and research role and my managerial role, I started getting involved with learning analytics, and now I'm an active member of this amazing community. And just to briefly start, I would like to start by acknowledging the lands of different indigenous people who have lived in Chile, where I'm located now, and also who currently live in Chile. And I would like to particularly zoom in the Mapuche culture. For this culture, learning it's an opportunity to develop the self and their personal identity. So therefore, I would like to invite you to reflect about the possibilities that learning analytics bring us today in that regard, and think also about the cultures that have lived where you're located, and think about what learning means or meant for them. So having said that, I would like to also share where I'm located right now. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm affiliated with the School of Engineering in Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. We have more than 6,000 undergraduate students, more than 1,000 graduate students. There is around 161, that kind of fluctuates, but faculty members today in our engineering school particularly. And also we have 138 that fluctuates every semester of part-time instructors, like people that come from industry. And so far, most of you have shared from where you're located, and it's great because as Justin mentioned, there's people joining us from North America, from, I see here, yeah, Europe, also other regions. So I invite whoever, for example, now, like us in Nigeria, that's great. So as you join, please share also for where you're joining us. And there will be more opportunities also to exchange. So I mentioned where I'm located now and the institution that I'm affiliated with, but if we think globally, I'm also part of the executive committee. I'm an officer at the Society for Learning Analytics Research, SOLAR, and I'm also the current program chair for LAC23. Actually, it has implied some collaboration with Justin as well. So I invite everyone to check out our website. Oh, I haven't not opened it, but I can do it real quick. And so if you're thinking about participating, submitting papers, whatever that is, I'm gonna just share with you the call throughout the chat. So give it some time. Oh, thank you. Justin was also ready for doing that. So after that quick introduction, let's start with our session that it's titled, well, this session is in collaboration with and in cooperation with SOLAR, but also with the Learning Analytics Network. And it's titled Towards Scaling Learning Analytics Using Instruments for Identifying Challenges and Key Actions for Institutional Adoption. So what we're going to do today, there is a brief introduction And then the idea is to share with you some instruments. So we're going to use what we have called, in the context of the LALA project, I will tell you more about that, what we call the LALA canvas. And then we're going to use a map that we call the LALA map. And the idea is that then we have an exit ticket, we will have some closing remarks and some time for questions and answers. So let's start with this, with the introduction and some working definitions, just to ensure that we are in the same place. This is an introductory session about learning analytics, but it's good to have like a quick thought about like be in the same page. So just to start, this chart that I took it from an article of Romero and Ventura from 2020, they show the growth of two research fields that have in a way grown together. One, it's educational data mining, that in this chart they call EDM, and the other one is learning analytics that they call LA. And as you can see, well, they started like growing together. Actually, educational data mining like grew a little bit in terms of productivity. This is what we're seeing here, the number of papers published. But then you can also see like how learning analytics start like exponentially grow in terms of productivity. And they kind of like talk about some milestones that help this growth of learning analytics research. One of the milestones is the first LAC conference, the first Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference in 2011 that took place in Canada. And then there is the first Learning Analytics Summer Institute, or what we also know as LACI. And then there's also the Learning at Scale conference. There's also the release of the Learning Analytics Handbook. There is a new version that was like launched last year. So in a way, we have seen that in short time over the last decade, learning analytics research has grown really rapidly. And when we talk about learning analytics, well, learning analytics is the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their context for purposes of understanding and optimizing learning and the environment in which it occurs. This is kind of like the definition that there are different definitions about learning analytics. Learning analytics is a field that is an intersection between mathematics, computer science, obviously education and learning sciences. But still, regardless of that, this is the most shared definition that it was coined during this first Learning Analytics Knowledge Conference that took place in 2011 in Canada. Still, we have seen that learning analytics research has grown really rapidly. But if we ask ourselves if learning analytics adoption has grown at the same pace, and the answer is not necessarily. It has not grown at the same pace. It has been more challenging to scale the use of learning analytics tools at an institutional level. So this has motivated research about learning analytics adoption, and particularly the development of frameworks to guide learning analytics adoption in different educational settings. So in some recent work that Mohammad Khalil led, and there I'm going to share this resource with you. Just give me a sec. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm playing with a lot of monitors over here. This is a resource. So in a recent article that was published in Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference last year, Mohammad Khalil and other co-authors talk about this existence of frameworks to promote learning analytics adoption. And frameworks were defined as templates or high-level visualizations of different elements and processes that are relevant for a particular outcome. In this case, that outcome is to scale the use of learning analytics tools. And then this article also defined what we could describe as models. And models basically are a sequence of operations to realize the phenomenon in question. Like that would be like a broad definition of a model. But in this case, what we expect throughout these frameworks and models for learning analytics adoption is actually to motivate the design and implementation of learning analytics at an institutional level. So there's also some research. I'm gonna share with you another piece that was published in an earlier version of the Learningalytics conference in 2018 by Shane Dawson and other authors. There's in the chat as well. And this work describes different types of models to promote the development of Learningalytics strategies. So for example, there are input models. These input models describe learning analytics adoption as a set of antecedent or like prior affordances that collectively help to meet certain requirements in order to develop large-scale implementations of Learningalytics. So what is required in an early phase in order to allow an institution to develop Learningalytics tools. And as examples of different types of input models, this article refers to a maturity index in order to conceptualize the maturity required by an institution in order to start developing or Learningalytics or adopting Learningalytics in terms of infrastructure, IT involvement, investment, and culture. Then there is actually an instrument that was proposed by Arnold and other co-authors that is called the Learningalytics and Research Index. That's why the acronym comes from that, LARI, or LARI, sorry for my English. And it basically also tries to identify the infrastructure, the culture, the data, and the processes that are key factors for Learningalytics adoption. And there is another framework proposed by Greller and Draxler that is called the Generic Framework for Learningalytics that refers to the data, the objectives, the instruments, the stakeholders, internal and external constraints as key dimensions that influence Learningalytics adoption. Then there is a second type of model that are called output models. And oh, there was like a bug here. I'm gonna correct that because I'm repeating myself in terms of models, but there's other type of models that in a way what the output models relate to is the frameworks of Learningalytics adoption that imply like a linear progression and tell more what is expected from the institution in terms of when Learningalytics is adopted at a large scale. And then finally, there are process models. So this is the third grouping that this study refers to. And essentially, this type of models map a sequence of processes that are required for analytics adoption. So one example is the Sheila policy framework that was developed in Europe, in a European project. And it's defined as an iterative process to guide the development of evidence-based policy for Learningalytics adoption through active engagement with relevant stakeholders. Then there is the Learningalytics continuous improvement cycle, and it's a cycle that refers to three key steps in order to promote the use of Learningalytics in an institution. That would be like data gathering, information processing, and knowledge application. And then there is another model that is called the Learningalytics reference model that uses guiding questions in order to promote a sequence of steps in order to implement Learningalytics, such as what kind of data do we need to gather, manage, and use, who is targeted by the analysis, and why and how does the system perform the analysis of the collected data. And a question that you might have, that we also had when we were developing when we were in the lab project, was like, when we wanted to scale Learningalytics into new regions, because in a way it grows really rapidly in North America, in Europe, in Australia, and in a way also other regions would like to benefit from the potential use of Learningalytics. We ask ourselves, like, are these frameworks transferable to other contexts? And particularly, are they transferable to Latin American higher education? So Latin America currently has about or over 10,000 higher education institutions, 60,000 programs, 20 million students, and growing. So this was something that struck us as a group of researchers, that we were like isolated working in this field, and then we joined in a way in the context of a project. We, with support from the European Commission, we were invited to think about how we could improve the quality of higher education by using learning analytics. And when we started working in this project, we identified some challenges in higher education in Latin America. So one big challenge is the rapid growth of higher education enrollment over the past 3 decades. There has been an important effort in terms of policy and also institutions to expand the coverage of higher education by increasing the number of institutions, particularly private institutions, also by increasing the number of students admitted in specific programs. But in a way, this growth has also, because it has been hard to how you manage resources and other issues like how we grow, but at the same time ensure that all the programs, all the institutions offer the same quality. And there have been some disparities in program quality. It's also a fact that I need to improve from the slide, but it's like the disparities are in terms of, like, for example, 50% of the students actually do not graduate, and from the 50% remaining, not everyone graduates at the expected time. So this is what, in a way, promoted this learning analytics for Latin America project that was funded by the European Commission, and that implied the exchange between European researchers and researchers in Latin America in order to build capacity to use learning analytics to improve higher education in Latin America. And this is what, in a way, motivated us to develop some instruments based in these models and frameworks that I explained earlier to scale learning analytics adoption. And regardless that they were developed in the context of Latin America, we believe that might be transferable to any institution that it's in an early or developing stage of learning analytics adoption. So having shared this introduction, I'm gonna just quickly stop sharing, but just to say, are there any questions, comments, reactions? You can put them in the chat. You can unmute yourselves if you want. Just a quick minute before we keep going to check if are there any questions, comments regarding the introduction that I have just shared. Okay, no questions or comments so far. So let me know if there is anything you are grappling with, or if you have any burning question throughout the second. Now we are moving to the second part. Just let me know. I'm gonna start sharing again. And the idea, okay, let me check if you're seeing the chat. Okay. Oh, there was a reaction over the chat as well, so that's good. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's what actually I'm working in a way in order to ensure that learning analytics, it's used at an institutional level, what implies certain standards. For example, now in our institution, we have our Digital Transformation Council, and there is also, we have like a data governance policy. And I have developed some tools that are being used in the School of Engineering, but the institution wants to, in a way, think about how tools that are developed, for example, at the department level or at the school level or the faculty level could be scalable at the whole institution. So for example, now I have to schedule some meetings with this Digital Transformation Council to present what we're doing in the School of Engineers, so they can evaluate how this is transferable to other faculties and schools. And it's exciting, but at the same time, it's threatening in terms of, like, you need to negotiate at an institutional level. What are you going to do with data if the same needs that you identified in a faculty are shared by other faculties? And yeah, that reaching that consensus becomes really challenging. And the idea is that the instruments that I'm going to share now are well developed in order to build that consensus. And yeah, thank you, Kathleen, also for your comment. Yeah, learning analytics, it's something that there is a lot of people in higher education that are excited about, but it's not as easy to say like, okay, how we start. So in a way, also the instruments that I'm going to share now are thought in a way in order to think like, how do we start? So that's the idea. So, well, and it's true, like now there's people preparing themselves in order to, for example, studying programs about learning analytics, so then they can take leadership roles in learning analytics initiatives. And at the same time, the challenge is that those people that are prepared or trained in learning analytics still need to work with people like, for example, the IT departments, academic vice provosts, deans, program chairs, faculty, and students in order to make these things happen. So they are like, they might imply, or they might play an important role in being liaisons between different units within a university. So great. So that's where we come from. So actually, yeah, in this project, we wanted to understand how to take learning analytics into an institutional level in order to improve the quality of institutions and programs that are offered in our region. And we started by developing this artifact that it's called the LALA Canvas to guide group discussions in early stages of learning analytics adoption. So, as I mentioned earlier, these instruments were developed under the Learning Analytics for Latin America project, the LALA project. So this is something that I'm just, in a way, it's not only my work, but it's also the work of other people that are affiliated with other universities, such as Universidad Austral de Chile, that is in the extreme south of Chile, Región de los Ríos, really pretty. We are really far away, but if anyone wants to visit, and that would be great. Then there were also researchers from Ecuador, from both Escuela Superior Politécnica del Litoral and also the La Universidad de Cuenca. So for example, ESPOL, it's in the coast of Ecuador, and Universidad de Cuenca, it's in the mountains. So they represent different landscapes, different ways, even into how they administrate the academic year within the same country. And from Europe, we had researchers that joined us from the University of Edinburgh and from KU Leuven and from Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. So they had prior experience being involved in the Sheila project that developed the Sheila framework that I showed earlier as a process model. And the idea was to exchange ideas about the tools that might be needed in the institution, in our institutions, and to see and explore how we could scale them to benefit the learning processes within our institutions. So we developed a framework. I'm not going to talk about the whole framework today, but I'm just going to put it into your mind so you know about it. So the LALA framework was based and inspired by the Sheila framework, but we synthesized what learning analytics adoption might imply in 4 dimensions. So there was an institutional dimension, and in a way, the question that the institutional dimension intends to respond or answer is, what are the institutional needs for learning analytics and what are the relevant considerations to have into mind? So for example, policies, processes, etc. Then there was the technological dimension. It's like what to do to design, implement, or adapt a learning analytics solution. Much of the learning analytics solutions, because of being analytical tools, in a way you need to follow like a software development process or some data bases and architecture guidelines. But even a step earlier before that is to think about like, yeah, what infrastructure do you have? Do you have people that are aware of this process? What are the requirements? How we transfer the needs that we have identified as institutional priorities into requirements for a specific tool, etc. Then we also have the ethical dimension, like what are the ethical issues needed to be taken into account when adopting learning analytics. So sometimes there are regional regulations, like for example, the GDPR in the case of Europe. There are country regulations that are associated to data protection laws or even the constitution, depending on the country. And there are also institutional regulations about the use of data. And those, in a way, all have a role in defining how you're going to use academic data, and particularly data from students and faculty. And finally, There's also that we identify also a community dimension, and the question that we wanted to answer is like, what steps should I follow to promote a learning analytics culture in my institution? And that's something that, as we were discussing earlier, like you need to build consensus, people need to be commonly aware of what learning analytics is and how to implement it, what are their priorities, and even also we saw it not only as in an institutional level, but also in a regional level and broader network. So even what we are doing now by exchanging ideas and being part of the session, in a way, it's part of the community dimension. It's like, I do not need to learn and develop learning analytics just by myself. I can work with other colleagues. I can learn from other institution experiences. I can learn from what has been done at a research level and transfer that into practice, etc. And within these dimensions, we, in a way, what we suggested or what we discussed within the project was like, these dimensions could be used separately, like you could follow the guidelines that you need when you need them from each one of these dimensions, or you could use these dimensions as a workflow. Like you could start by diagnosing the current state of the institution using the institutional dimension, and then you could design by being inspired by the ethical, the technological dimension, and then you could pilot it, taking into consideration the ethical dimension, and then you could scale thinking from this community dimension. But still, if we wanted to zoom into the institutional dimension, that was the one that I was more involved. We have like a work plan in order to answer this question about what are the institutional needs and considerations to adopt a learning analytics solution or process. And the work plan included to perform an institutional diagnosis, to understand the political context, to identify what is expected, to develop a change strategy. And we developed certain resources in order to answer this guiding question and work and develop this work plan, this proposed work plan. And one of those resources was the LALA Canvas. And the LALA Canvas, it's a model to guide discussions to identify potential needs for learning analytics strategies in a university where LAI initiatives are still scarce or implemented on a small scale. So this LALA Canvas has 6 components, and the idea is that we are going to try it out today with you. But before that, in order to guide you, I'm going to explain 2 examples of how the LALA Canvas could be used in order to frame what could later turn into a tool. And so we're going to go through each one of these components. But in order to start looking at different tools, I'm going to give you an example. This is an example of a tool that it's called the Self-Tracking Time on Task app. And it was developed at my School of Engineering. This is a demo video. We're going to try it out. Let me know if the sound, if you're hearing the video. This is a demo video that we developed for the ECTEL conference, the European Conference on Technology Enhanced Learning.
Do you know the Self-Tracking Time on Task app? Well, it basically consists of
I just wanted to check.
Web-based weekly timesheets, in which students can voluntarily report the amount of hours dedicated to the activities of a course for a certain week. During the second semester of 2020, we applied these web-based weekly timesheets in 134 course sections, and more than 30,000 students self-reported time on task throughout
every time that I do a click, it stops.
16 weeks. Teaching staff had a visualization to monitor their students' responses week by week in an aggregate way in order to implement adjustments in their courses. Since then, we have been preparing something specially designed for students. We have integrated our self-tracking time on task with Canvas, and this works like this. This is still work in progress, so this is why we have presented the simpler version for ECTEL 2021. If you are interested, check out our work and contact us.
Great, so that was the example of a first learning analytics tool that we developed at our school level, but now we're thinking to scale it to an institutional level. I'm gonna share with you some links if you're interested in getting to know more about this tool. And so if we look at it and we think about what inspired this tool, I'm gonna share the story behind this tool by using the Lala Canvas. So what we wanted to change, and this was before even developing the tool, there was a discussion at a school level about how to improve student self-regulation. Then there was also about like how to improve how faculty and instructors plan their courses in order to avoid, for example, student overload. And there was also a discussion at a program level, at a study plan level, about credit assignment. So there were all these things that the institution wanted to change, that in the context of the Lala Canvas, we called it like desired behaviors, like what is our target to change. And then we have a strategy for change, or change strategy. So in a way, there were some courses were already implementing like paper-based weekly timesheets. For example, there were project design courses that were using weekly timesheets. In the case of engineering, it's really common, for example, when you work in consultancy, to use the weekly timesheets to report the time that you have dedicated to different projects. So in a way, some project-based courses were using this type of artifact to monitor workload, but also, like, for example, how students were progressing in different project deliverables that they have in the context of these specific courses. So we wanted to leverage this practice and take it into a higher level. And what internal capacities do we have to do that? So within the School of Engineering, we have an information technologies nucleus that develops tools for the school. We also had some governmental funding, because there was a project within the Ministry for Education that wanted to promote the assessment and evaluation of student workload at a course level and at a program level. And there was also some institutional funding that we applied as a School of Engineering in order to do some developments. And within the political context, there was a concern about the credit system of universities, and particularly Chile wanted to develop a system that was equivalent or have a certain degree of equivalency to the European credit transfer system. So it was easier to, for example, when you students do exchange between different courses and programs in order to make that happen. And there were also different key stakeholders involved. For example, there was the people that were interested in this project was the undergraduate office, the academic vice provost office, and also engineering faculty and students. But how we could assess if we implemented something like what inspired this type of application, how we could assess? Well, there were some end of semester surveys, for example, as the student evaluations of teaching, where students were asked the amount of time globally that they have spent in a course. And if we develop a tool, we also knew that we could do some cognitive walkthroughs in order to see if we scale these paper-based timesheets into a web-based timesheet, if this was usable from the perspective of students and faculty, etc. So in a way, when I'm doing the reverse engineering of this is the Lala Canvas that synthesizes what motivated the development of this self-tracking time on task app. And in a way, this was raised by discussions among different stakeholders. I'm going to give you a second example, and then we're going to try the Lala Canvas ourselves. And if you're interested, well, there are these resources that I have already shared with you. So now we're going to see the example of another tool.
This demo video shows the first version of the curriculum
Oh, what happened?
analytics tool. Managers and teaching staff can authenticate themselves using their university credentials so they can edit program or course level information. Managers and teaching staff can search for a course by entering the course number in this tab. Then they can access the information for a specific course on a specific academic period. In the Skills tab, staff can establish the relationship between a graduate skill and a course learning outcome. In the Indicators tab, staff can add performance indicators associated with graduate skills that are aligned to course learning outcomes. In the Assessment tab, staff can describe the assessment tools used in this course, besides indicating what learning outcome is going to be measured by each one of them. In the Reports tab, staff can see an automated report that shows students' attainment of a graduate skill according to their performance in a course assessment tool. Staff can choose a comparison period. And an overall threshold percentage. A bar chart shows the percentage of students that perform over a cutoff score. By clicking in a bar, staff can see how students perform in a specific learning outcome according to different performance levels. For example, unsatisfactorily, developing, satisfactory, or exemplary. This was our demo video. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so sorry about that. So the idea that behind the Canvas by Alison, hope this was useful for you. For the ones remaining, if we think about what inspired the Canvas behind this, was like, for example, well, the desired behavior was to ensure the implementation of a new outcome-based curriculum, and that implied assessing and evaluating outcomes at a course level, at an assignment, like at a subject level, but also at a program or study or unit level. And the change strategy was like, we already were required to assess student outcomes for international accreditation. So the internal capacities, what we already had in order to make this happen, is that we have this IED nucleus that could develop tools for the School of Engineering. And we also have our own engineering education unit that was interested in order to develop and lead this project. In the political context, there were in the national level interests in order to, there was a program that provided fundings to schools of engineering that was called New Engineering for 2030. And there was also the AVET accreditation. And where were the key stakeholders that were behind this project was the undergraduate office, the program chairs, the engineering faculty and students, and how we could assess the success of using learning analytics to promote this initiative. Well, it could be the results of the accreditation process or perceptions of faculty in how a tool could potentially make easier to assess student outcomes. So this, in case you're interested in this initiative, I have other resources to share with you. I will share it through the chat. And the idea is that now we try the Canvas ourselves. So this might be a little bit confusing, but because we're talking about learning analytics, I want to share it with you a couple of learning analytics tools. And the idea, we're gonna do a change here because we have less of 20 people. So just give me a quick sec. I'm gonna unhide a slide that I had hidden, and I'm gonna to share this one. So we're gonna use Jamboard instead because it might be more fun, I guess. So here I have a link. Wait for me a second. I'm gonna share it with you. And the idea is that, oh, I'm gonna share the Jamboard in the meantime. And I see a question from Rahira. Let me know if I pronounce your name correctly. So it says, how do the timesheet system address learning speed differences in students, and there will be fast learners and slow learners, right? That's a really good question. And so in early on, this timesheet application was focused on on a non-existent, but an average student. So we wanted to measure how different students self-reported their time spent in different course activities. And by doing that, we started estimating the perceived average time per week, and with that, see if that average was equivalent to the academic credits. But then we realized that actually there are a lot of disparities among students concerning the time that they dedicate to course activities, because it could be because of their pace to learn, their level of motivation, if they're struggling with other aspects. And now, as I mentioned earlier, when we presented the tool, it was a work in progress, but now we're actually working in understanding better self-regulation. What we have done now is that we're going to apply the weekly timesheets, but we start with a diagnosis of different learning profiles, depending on their self-regulatory capacities, depending on their learning approaches so far. So for example, if they are surface learners or deep learners in the context of a course, and depending on that, we're gonna start giving them recommendations in order to understand better how these self-reported times are aligned to characteristics of our students in order to provide support based on the data as well. So really, really good question. Thank you for that. All right. In case you have any other questions of the tools that I have just presented, please make them in the chat. In the meantime, the idea is that you go to the following Jamboard. And the idea is that I'm going to show over here, we have this Jamboard. So I took the first one, and the idea is that each participant use a different one. So I'm going to call some names and just let me know, do we need a pause from the recording?
Yeah, we can pause right here. Yeah, we can pause the recording, I guess, if we're going to do breakout for a little bit. Yeah, we can restart it when we come back together.
Okay, great. So any reactions? I'm still gonna, any comments, any questions? So the idea is that you can use this template to trigger group discussions among different people in your institution in order to bring consensus about what behavior could benefit from the adoption of learning analytics. That was the whole point. That's how we use it in the case of the Learning Analytics project. And if you're more interested, we are developing a chapter of a book in order to show what was the experience of the project, the different workshops in which have used this template, and the outcomes and the lessons learned that we have captured so far. So just in the sake of time, I'm going to move to the second activity, but please, if you have comments or reactions, you can put them in the chat. A second instrument that we also developed in the context of the LALA project was the LALA map. And it was to assess or understand the leadership and the organizational maturity required for scaling learning analytics adoption. And we built this map as a result of the cross-case analysis of the learning analytics tools that were created under the LALA project. So for example, in terms of leadership, we observed that the different institutions that were involved in this project engaged different stakeholders throughout the design and implementation of the learning analytics tool. And in terms of organizational maturity, we observed that there were different status at each institution concerning the adoption of learning analytics and the use of educational data to inform decisions and actions. So now I'm going to show the results of this. So because of seeing these differences across the different institutions that were involved in the LALA project, we could realize that there were, like, for example, there were initiatives, learning analytics initiatives that started really from the bottom up, like students or faculty or researchers wanted to promote the adoption of a learning analytics initiative, or they could be really top down. For example, like vice provosts or high level leadership interested in promoting the adoption of learning analytics. And in terms of maturity, we also see differences, for example, of like institutions that were more conscious or were starting to be aware of the potential benefits of learning analytics. Then there were some institutions that used this as experimentation. There were some institutions that were already using it at a department level or a faculty level. And then there were all institutions that were using it at an institutional level. And then there were institutions that were driving transformation by the use of learning analytics. So I'm also going to share a couple of examples in order to make this easier. So for example, one tool that we developed in the context of LALA project was a tool that we call Note My Progress. This was in the context of Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. And it was a dashboard that shows students that were taking MOOCs produced by the School of Engineering in Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, the time that they spent in a course session in contrast to time that were spent procrastinating. This was done because of a plugin that students voluntarily could install in their web browser, and that plugin could monitor the time that they spent in different web sessions and in a way show them, for example, how much time they have spent in a course across the week, and for example, how much was to complete certain videos or evaluations, monitoring and web scraping, like information also from Coursera. That's where our MOOCs are offered. And this was an initiative promoted by researchers at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. This project was led by a professor called Mar Pérez San Agustín. She's now in Toulouse, in Université Paul Sabatier. But at that moment, she was in Católica, and it was involved. Jorge Maldonado Maguad was involved from, he's currently in Universidad of Cuenca. He identified metrics that were relevant for this dashboard. Ronald Pérez Álvarez, who is now in the Universidad of Costa Rica, was the one that was behind the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of the tool. Then in my case, in my managerial and research role at Católica, I was in charge of seeing how we could implement this in different courses, in different MOOCs. And there was also a master student, now graduated, Diego Sapunar, helping with data organization, data analysis, etc. And so if we wanted to understand where this initiative in PUC Chile was located in our LALA map, we would say that, okay, it was mainly driven by researchers, and it was still in an experimentation phase. Like, in a way, we were interested in understanding self-regulation within an online environment. We wanted to see if a tool was helpful or not in order to improve time management within massive open online courses, MOOCs. So if we wanted to locate it in the map, we will locate it there. There was a second example from SPOL, Escuela Superior Politécnica, that is called the Academic Counseling System. So they had a system in order to monitor the courses that students enroll for a specific period, their performance, if they approved or not approved the course. Within the LALA project, they wanted to improve this tool, and the leadership that was behind that was the vice provost and also the Center for Information Technology. So there were like high-level leaders involved in order to improve this academic counseling system. And actually, this system was improved in the context of the LALA project. So you could see, for example, the courses enrolled by students, that the ones that they have approved with this green ticket, the ones that they approved for a second time with this yellow ticket, the ones with a red cross, the ones that they failed. And the idea is that academic counselors could have this picture of like how the student has progressed throughout a study plan in order to guide them to make better decisions in course enrollment periods, and also to prevent dropouts. So this was the idea, and this was in a way promoted, adopted at an institutional level. So if we wanted to locate this project, we need within the LALA map, we put it here because it was adopted institutionally and high-level leaders were involved in this initiative. So the idea now is also to try the LALA map in the case of your institution. So what I'm going to do is to share with you a Padlet link. Just give me one sec. I'm gonna show you so you can join over here. Here's the Padlet, and then I'm gonna open this in our screen. Let me know if you can join. This is how it should look like. So let me know if you can join. I'm gonna take a look at the chat. Okay, it says that you joined, that's right. So what is the instruction? The idea is that you make a post clicking the plus sign and you say, for example, your institution, your current LAI initiative, or something that you're studying within Learning Analytics, and you grab and post your and post it and locate it in the Lala map depending on these two axes. And then we can have some time to, so if anyone wants to share and explain themselves in why you located your initiative there, we can have a quick conversation about that. So I'm gonna end this, and then I'm gonna show an example. So for example, what I was saying is that you can click here, and you can say, for example, here, I would say PUC Chile, that is my institution. And then my initiative, I, for example, could say the curriculum analytics tool, not necessarily the Note My Progress, the one that I showed earlier. And for example, today, I'm gonna post this, and you will see myself here, and I would locate that one here, because it's another initiative that has been used at a department level or faculty level. And we involve, for example, we involve deans. It was like a middle manager type of initiative. So we were like in the middle between bottom up and top down. So now I see that you're joining, and you see how the posts worked. You can move them around. Let me know if you have any problems. I'm gonna take some minutes. Okay, just in the meantime, if you wanna keep moving around the Padlet, I'm gonna share a couple of resources in the chat. So just in case anyone is interested, well, we have a book chapter that describes how this map was developed. And then I will take into account the suggestion that you made in the chat, Amir. Just in the meantime, I have this resource in case you are interested. And we also have another article about the different initiatives that were implemented in the context of Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, contrasting this top-down and bottom-up leadership and its implications. So having shared that, let's see, I'm gonna like update this. Uh-oh, there you are. And then I'm gonna also a little bit, so we can see, here we are. Oh, they move somewhere, but they are all around this face. Mine move over here, so just I'm gonna increase it again. Interesting. I'm trying to zoom it out, but then it looks weird. Let me see. Okay. Anyone would like to share the reasoning behind why you locate your initiative there? Or anything that comes into your mind while you were doing this exercise?
I can share.
Thank you, Kathleen.
So I work with faculty right now to build their online courses. And unfortunately, there are some faculty that don't really have any pedagogy experience. And as a former teacher, sometimes they're just trying to build their online courses in the easiest way for them, which is just taking their face-to-face format and putting it online. That doesn't necessarily resonate the same way in an online classroom. So for us on my ID team, there are several of us that are former teachers who are aware of the benefits of doing the analysis and trying to figure out ways that we could, I don't want to say prove, but show and highlight to instructors that if you just organize the course a little bit differently, it'd be more effective and students would be more successful. So there's this awareness on our end, but ultimately it's the faculty who build the courses. So I feel like we're really at those beginning stages of, okay, we know this, but how can we get the faculty buy-in and get them to work with us so that we can sort of show them and work with them to have better student success rate in their courses. So that's why I put it in the bottom up and awareness stage, because we're sort of at the beginning of this process.
Thank you, Kathleen, for sharing. I see. So you're starting to become conscious about the potential benefit of using learning analytics in order to improve course design, but in a way you have not experimented or adopted anything yet or developed anything yet, and in a way you want this to be bottom up, or it's still in a bottom up phase because it's the challenge is to engage faculty.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for sharing. And that my suggestion would be, well, there is a lot of literature around learning design and learning analytics. There is people, for example, from Pompeu Fabra, this university in Barcelona, where, for example, Davini Hernandez Leo has been really involved in terms of learning design, and there are other researchers as well, if that helps. And also, I would say that in a certain point, for example, if you want to scale this initiative, you can start moving by why we don't do something in a small scale in order to understand if this is helpful. So maybe you will not jump in from here to here, but maybe just to here, engaging faculty and everything. And then when you want to move further in these stages, it would be also to, for example, start involving middle managers or like high-level leadership in order to make it possible. Because in an experimentation phase, you can keep it bottom up yet, but then if you want to scale something and receive resources in order to, for example, have support in order to maintain a learning analytics tool or dashboard or any device, you will need some support from another levels, at least a middle level. So just these quick comments from what was our learning in the context of the LADA project. Thank you for sharing that, Kathleen. Anyone else would like to share their reasoning?
Yeah, I can share mine. Hi, my name is Ranjita, and I'm trying to design a dashboard for the social presence, which is a qualitative one. So I'm trying to use text analytics to show the social presence in a collaborative assignment in a dashboard. And currently I'm designing a qualitative case study to learn how the faculty is currently doing manually. I have taken a small activity, which is a discussion board, and want to know how they are doing prompting the social presence actually now, so that I can design the tool better, which can help the faculty for giving early feedback by seeing the social presence and the teaching. They can understand how far they are using the teaching presence, appreciating the community of inquiry method for designing the collaborative activities.
Thank you, Ranjita. So in this case, is this your post?
Yes.
Perfect. I see. So in a way, you're still bottom up as well, but then also like in a way you're trying already to use it at a department or school level.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And there were some questions in the chat about these instruments, and the idea is that you can, if you want to replicate that or even show this reasoning to your peers, to other people that you want to drive in your project, that's the whole purpose of the session, is to make these resources available. Just in the sake of time, because we have like 3 minutes left, I'm going to share with you an exit ticket. It's what I call, it's just a Google form to grab some opinions from you, from from this session, from the instruments that you use. There is also an optional text box if you want to leave your email and you want me to email you resources more directly. I know that the Learning Analytics Learning Network in a way makes available as well the recording and some links. So I will also coordinate with them in order to make these instruments available for you. I would like to thank, well, I use this template from Slide Carnival, so to acknowledge that. And also to thank, well, the possibility of developing this session, my LADA project colleagues who are not connected, but they were behind all the development of these instruments and artifacts, and also Solar, because the events of the network are in cooperation with our society. And the idea is to keep you and remind you that we're a community. So now you know me, and if you have any questions about learning analytics adoption or the experiences that you're having in your institutions, it would be great to stay connected. So if you have any questions or you want to keep connected, this is my Twitter account, this is my email, and I also shared with you this folder, this form, this Google form, if you want to leave your opinions and perceptions about the instruments that we used in the session. And I also want to thank you for your active participation, your engagement within the instruments. Hope it was useful and informative to what you're doing in your institutions.